But when you talk about these vegetable production systems, okay, you do primary tillage, you do secondary tillage, you have to put false beds, you have to put plastic mulch in not all, but in most of vegetable crops. You put drip irrigation system, okay, for not all farmers drip irrigate, but mostly big farmers do. uh, so you put drip irrigation for that. You incorporate herbicides, pesticides into the soil, and some of the small growers that we have, even though we are so far advanced now, are still doing manual weeding. Okay, so manual weeding is a practice as well in these production systems. Then manual harvesting. Okay, we don't have meaningful ways to harvest these crops right now. So manually, most of the watermelon and other fresh produce is harvested manually.
Welcome to the Crop Science Podcast Show, brought to you by Wise and Eggs. I'm Brian Arnell, and I'm coming to you from the campus of Oklahoma State University. Today on the podcast, we have on Dr. Bhupinder Jatana, Assistant Professor Horticulture at Edisto Research and Education Center at Clemson University. Bhupinder's research focuses on regenerative and resilient horticulture production systems. His work is on optimizing for resource use efficiency, soil health, nutrient management, vegetable production systems. In addition, he has strong passion for grafting in vegetables, and his work is he works quite a bit in optimizing the management practices for grafted nursery for its economic viability. Dr. Jatana, thank you so much for joining us today on the Crop Science Podcast Show. I'm really excited to get the chance to visit with you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
And I must say, I love the Edisto Research Center. I've been there a couple times over the years, and it's a beautiful location. So, how did you end up, in this field of science and at Clemson?
So, Brian, if I have to talk about how I end up in this field of science, it came from family. Okay, so my father is a farmer. So we own some family farms back in India. And I used to work with my father from my childhood days. Like in my school days, I used to, go out to the field with him, irrigate fields, apply fertilizers, and do all kind of chores that you need to do. And that's how I decided, okay, I want to do higher education in plant sciences. Okay. And then I joined bachelor's of agriculture, followed by master's in agronomy at Punjab Agriculture University. And then some of my friends and me decided, okay, we want to go for higher studies, go higher than this. And we decided to come to US for PhD, and that's how I joined Clemson University. While doing PhD at Clemson University, I loved the environment, I loved the people, I loved the vibe and the growers and stakeholders in the state. And Then I moved briefly for a year to New York, but Clemson was my first choice, so I came back to Clemson again.
And I like I said, I've been down to Edisto at least 2 or 3 times, and I got to tell you, you're absolutely right. I love the educators. The time I had with your extension educators and just the folks just on the research station and the farmers and the producers, the vegetable producers. It's such just a wonderful region that I would recommend most to go to. So I guess moving into, why we're here on the Crop Science Podcast is tell us a little bit about your ongoing research.
Sure. So we have a couple of projects going on right now. So the center theme, as you just mentioned before, is regeneration, soil regeneration, and resilient vegetable production systems. So a couple of projects we have are on resource utilization efficiency in these production systems, how efficiently you can manage the nutrients, water, and other resources. That since these systems are resource intensive systems as compared to the row crops. So one flag ship project is centered around the resource management, which also ties to weed management to some extent, and soil-borne pest management. We work with collaborators, pathologists, weed scientists in that aspect for their expertise. The other projects we work in is soil health in vegetable production system, which is very important in terms of vegetable production systems. The other one, we work in grafting, as you mentioned before as well. Grafting is a really good technique when it comes to soil-borne pest management. Okay, and the resilience of these production systems. But the challenge with grafting is it's very expensive compared to the common nursery. For example, one of the grafter rootstock that his has been recently developed, really good rootstock, a lot of potential, but it is 3 to 4 times more expensive to purchase the nursery of that. So what we are interested in is to fine tune the management practices for these to see if we can make these economically viable for the growers.
So, Bhupinder, let's spend a little bit of time discussing what vegetables, what crops specifically are in your region. When I think of that environment, I'm thinking of a lot of cotton and corn, some soy. So what are the vegetable crops that you're working in and the local producers are?
Definitely. South Carolina is very proud of leafy greens. Okay, so South Carolina is number one in some of the leafy greens like mustard greens, turnip greens, and number two in production throughout the U.S. in kale, in collards, and some of the other leafy greens. So definitely leafy greens, a lot of it. In my region, the region around Edisto Research and Education Center, we have a lot of watermelon growers. South Carolina is number eighth or ninth in watermelon production in the U.S. A lot of tomatoes, all type processing, fresh market, grape and cherry type, and then we have sweet potato. Not as big as North Carolina and Georgia and some of the other states, but still we have some big farmers for sweet potato at this station. No, not at this station in the South Carolina. So these are most the biggest vegetable crops that we have, but we have somewhat growers that are growing all kind of vegetable growers. Some are growing, let's say, okra at one spot, but yeah, so all kind of vegetables are there, but the ones I mentioned are the bigger ones.
When it comes to and I'm bouncing because there's a lot of things that are just jumping in my mind as you're saying this. On the grafting side, what crops are you doing the most grafting in?
We work a lot in watermelons.
Okay.
And the reason for that being is to serve the growers in the area. So let me go a little bit in background why grafting and why in watermelon. You might have heard about the Fusarium wilt in watermelon. Okay, so it's a devastating disease of watermelon. Right now we have third race as well for this particular species that infest watermelon. We don't, and the second race is the most spread out in the U.S. We don't have any resistant cultivar to race 2 and race 3 for grafted for watermelon, and only meaningful solution is grafting right now. There are some pesticides that do some good job, but pesticides, as you know, has their own challenges as well. So grafting is a good technique, but it is expensive. So we work a lot in grafting in watermelon specifically.
That's fascinating. So for me, when you spoke of grafting, in my head, I'm thinking, for our environment, it's always we're grafting pecans, we're grafting the tree crops. I would have never have considered, probably just because of the amount of times, right? So when you graft a tree crop, you graft it and you're done for years. But in a crop such as watermelon, when we're talking not doing 100 or 200 per produce, you're talking, I'm assuming, thousands in some cases. What's that process of grafting a vegetable crop? That's fascinating to me that you would, like you said, it's got to be time consuming. So
It is. It is time consuming. It is laborious. That is why it is expensive. On an average, a common plant will cost you around 25 to 30 cents or 40 cents, depending upon the variety. But a grafted plant will cost you $1.20 or $1.30 or plus. In some root stocks, it might cost you $1.50. So what they do, they cut the cotyledon. Okay, they take the root stock of the which they want to graft the variety on. They take the sequium and they clip it together. Okay, they prepare a closed system with good relative humidity and let it heal for a couple of days before letting it go out there. So it takes time, it takes effort, and there are commercial suppliers of these nurseries out there that supply these two.
that was my next question. Is it 100% commercial? Is some of this done on in situ on the farms, or is it a blend of both?
As far as I know, I think mostly it's commercial. You can do it on farm as well, but commercially it is available and you can buy. So what we do for ours, we buy it from commercial suppliers.
I'm assuming the cost difference is able to be offset because this is one way to reduce the use of pesticides. So therefore, now you're getting into some maybe higher value tagged options of organic or sustainable or reduced input. Is that a correct assumption or?
That is what we are trying to do. Okay, so what we have seen so far from the studies we have conducted, some of the rootstocks are very efficient in making use of resources. Okay, they have bigger root system. Roots can explore more soil surface, more soil volume, and make use of even minute quantities of these resources in the soil, like nutrients, water, and other resources. So what we and the problem is that we don't have tailored management recommendations for that, particularly making use of these minute resources, and we are oversupplying the resources to these efficient plants based on the recommendations from less efficient plants. So what we are trying to do to come up with a system where you know how much you need to apply, particularly for these grafted plants, and by doing so, you cut back on the cost for, let's say, nutrients, water, pesticides, and other things, and you use that cost to buy your grafted plants. So that's what we're trying to do right now. Yes.
That makes perfect sense. It doesn't take a whole lot of cost savings in pesticides and fertilizer to offset the cost of a couple watermelon plants. Let me, I guess, transition. A lot of the time on this podcast we spend talking row crops and forage systems. Can you dive into a little bit about the management practices that differ between, say, corn or cotton production in the region and vegetable crop production?
That is a great question. Okay, so it's very important when we talk about soil health and all these kind of things, regeneration, resilience. It is important to know the difference between row crops and vegetable crops. Row crops, okay, you when you talk about the row crops, you have less number of management practices. Okay, you do primary tillage, you make a good seed bed, you plant your crop. If it's a rain fed, you don't need to irrigate, you just apply fertilizer. If it's irrigated, you apply irrigation to it. At the end, you come with a combine or something and you harvest your crop, and then you can leave the stubble on the soil. If you want to plant cover crop, you can do that. And there are less number of management practices. But when you talk about these vegetable production systems, okay, you do primary tillage, you do secondary tillage, you have to put false beds, you have to put plastic mulch in not all, but in most of vegetable crops. You put drip irrigation system, okay, for not all farmers drip irrigate, but mostly big farmers do. Uh, so you put drip irrigation for that. You incorporate herbicides, pesticides into the soil, and some of the small growers that we have, even though we are so far advanced now, are still doing manual weeding. Okay, so manual weeding is a practice as well in these production systems. Then manual harvesting. Okay, we don't have meaningful ways to harvest these crops right now. So manually, most of the watermelon and other fresh produce is harvested manually. Then at the end of the season, after harvesting, you need to remove the plastic. You need to remove the drip tape. Okay, and that takes a lot of time. That disturbs soils a lot than that of the row crop production systems.
As you mentioned that, in row crops, we have the ability to leave stubble with crop rotation. How do vegetable farmers and producers deal with rotation? You mentioned there's, more tillage and you got residue management. Is there much rotation, or are they kind of confined into what they can be producing?
Mostly confined. Okay, so one crop a year, mostly. Bigger farmers, they have a lot on their hand, even with one crop. So they rarely produce second crop in a year. Uh, some vegetable crops will allow you to put good cover crop in season. But again, the challenge is to how you want to manage the biomass of that cover crop, which is a challenge if you have a lot of biomass and it's not decomposed, well decomposed. It can hinder in putting plastic mulch. It can hinder in laying beds and in putting the drip tape. So mostly farmers go with one crop in a year, but some farmers do put cover crops, and there is right now with all this climate smart production, there is a huge push for that to incorporate cover crops into this system.
How much of the vegetable production uses plastic culture or plastic covering of the beds?
Not all crops need that, but mostly yes, because plastic culture will help you, manage weeds. Otherwise you will have hard time managing weeds. So mostly watermelon, yes, I would say mostly, if not all, mostly use plastic mulch. Example like processing tomatoes, no, not so far, not so much. It's on bare ground because processing, you are not producing it for the fresh market. You just harvest it in one go. But for the fresh market, usually they put the plastic.
So I guess this is a two-part question. This comes from, I haven't been around vegetable production in a while. I used to, kind of collaborate or work with some folks out on the Eastern Shore around Maryland and Virginia, more of the tomato production in that region, and then some around here. At least back then, there was a fair amount of fumigation or soil sterilants. Is that used much anymore? Is that used much in your region?
Some of it, yes, but there is a huge push from last decade or 2 decades to transition away from methyl bromide. For nematodes, yes, fumigation is still being done for nematodes or soil-borne pests, but not as much as it was used to before.
And it's probably been about a decade since I was doing some of that stuff. So can you describe, and to me there's this challenge with that. How do you work on soil health and those parameters when you're dealing with a thing like nematodes, and some of your options are really limited on good nematode control, and so you have to fumigate, but you're also trying to improve soil, and there's this conflicting management strategies.
So it's all about a balanced approach. Okay, so you have to balance out the things. How you balance out. That's what we. That's what the I would say the definition of resilience and regeneration. Okay, how you balanced out your management practices to you know that you cannot eliminate these practices because these are essential practices for you to produce, but you have to balance out these. Okay, so for example, Definitely fumigation. You need to put the plastic mulch. You need to have the system, and it will disturb the soil. So what one of the project that we are doing? Okay, so okay, you need to do all these practices at the same time for the soil regeneration. Cover crops are very important. What are the ways you can manage the biomass of these cover crops in an efficient way, in a quick way, and at the same time the biomass is not hindering you to put plastic, put the drip tape, and do perform all other duties that you need to perform.
As we look at that, and I'm going to transition our final couple of minutes because this is another thing. I'm soil fertility is my background, and a lot of the things, and I tease my horticulture peers and companions, is that a lot of the things that we get in row crops that are maybe interesting blends of nutrients tend to come from the horticulture sector at times. So how does a vegetable crop grower deal with the magnitude of products that are available in the marketplace, and how do they get the right one? For how do they select their fertilizers that they're going to utilize when a row crop farmer is going to likely go to bulk commodity nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and yet we start talking about drip tape and trickle fertigation, and you've got a million different products with 80 blends of nutrients at a half of a percent of concentration. How do you help walk producers through that barrage of options?
That is a great question. Okay, so we worked quite a bit on that, and then we produced an extension article as well, and I think a couple of months back on that. So soil test, okay, you cannot less, there is no words to emphasize soil test, the importance of soil test, okay, and that holds true for vegetable production systems as well. The first and foremost, do a soil test in advance enough for you to apply any lime or any other requirements that you need to meet. And most of, if you specify the crop that you are hoping to plant in that soil, most of these service laboratories will recommend you the fertilizer needs for that crop. uh, so that is the first step. Okay, if you are talking about drip irrigating or fertigating your fertilizer out of all these bunch of options, okay, first and foremost, it's important to know the solubility of your fertilizer. If your fertilizer is soluble in water or not. If it is not soluble in water, that is a no go from the start itself. Then you need to check the solubility, how much it is soluble in a unit of water. Let's say it is, this information is mostly on the fertilizer label. You can read it through that. If it is not available there, you might want to contact your supplier for that and see if it is soluble or not. So that is the first step. Okay, and then the second step is to check the fertilizer compatibility with other fertilizers. Let's say if you bought two fertilizers. Let's say you bought urea for nitrogen, and you bought calcium or potassium sulfate, which is potassium fertilizer. Okay, you try to mix those, but it is important to know whether these two fertilizers are compatible with each other or not. If these are not compatible and react with each other, form precipitates and other soluble impurities, and then these fertilizers are no go from the start. And to know if the fertilizers are compatible or not, there are a lot of fertilizer compatibility charts out there. Just search in the Google fertilizer compatibility chart, and it will pop up right there, and you should be able to figure out if it is compatible or not. Third important point is to see if your fertilizer mixture or your fertilizer blend that you want to go is compatible with your irrigation water or not. Okay, irrigation water has a lot of ions in there. We at station has some iron in there. So fertilizer can interact with iron or other mineral elements in your water, carbonates, bicarbonates, calcium, magnesium, and others. and form insoluble impurities or precipitates in there, which can actually not just render your fertilizer ineffective, but can clog your drip system as well. So that is the third important point. To know if the fertilizer is compatible with your irrigation water or not, there is a technique called jar test, where you collect your irrigation water, you mix the fertilizer in that irrigation water at the concentration or a little bit higher concentration that you are hoping to inject it at, and then you leave it for 24 hours and see after 24 hours if there are any precipitates been built at the bottom of the jar, if there is any cloudiness in the water. If it is, it's no go from there. So that is important, and these are the criteria as farmers can use to select for fertilizers out of all these grades that are available in the market.
It's time for our famous three.
Wisenetics turns podcast airtime into brand authority. We don't sell ads, we elevate voices. Curious how far your voice can go to become a reference in the industry and attract more leads? Scan the QR code and discover how we can turn your expertise into unmatched brand authority. Let's transform expertise into influence, starting now.
There's a lot going on there, and I appreciate your time, Dr. Jatana. We're going to have to move on to our final wrap-up questions. And it's been a lot of fun, but as you're looking through this, because you've got a lot of stuff you're talking about. You're talking about soil health, you're talking about nutrient management, and you're talking about graft. You got a lot going on. What is your go-to work resource when you're needing help, needing direction? Where do you go?
In terms of to know what the growers are dealing with, we have a robust extension network in the state, and Clemson is proud of that. Clemson is a proud university which feels proud to introduce the extension system in the US. So we are proud of our extension staff that always help us figure out these problems, and we try to come up with solution to meet those challenges for the growers. That is the most important aspect to my research and my go-to source, the first extension. Then we have a robust publication system in the Clemson network, land grant press system for all the grower related, practical solutions. We go there in case, and we publish in that as well.
Second, and more of just kind of a fun question: what do you do in your free time? Because assistant profs have so much free time. So what do you do in your free time?
I love gardening. I love growing vegetables. So I am in a process to build some vegetable beds at my home. So I do gardening all the time if I'm free.
And you're in a beautiful environment for gardening too. I can imagine your season is beautifully long, and the variety that you can get's got to be beautiful.
I agree with you.
Finally, where do people go to find out more about your work?
Clemson website. Okay, so I have a profile at Clemson, Bhupinder Jatana, in Department of Plant and Environmental Sciences. So you can see my profile or some of the work that we do at a digital research and education center in that page. My contact information is there, my email address, my phone number is there. So if you want to reach out, you want to contact me, please use that phone number, that email address. I am very responsive to those as well.
Fantastic. Well, folks, that wraps up another episode of the Crop Science Podcast Show presented by Wisenetics. Thanks for joining us today with our guest, Dr. Bhupinder Jatana. He is Assistant Professor of Horticulture at Edisto Research and Education Center at Clemson University. Remember, if you enjoyed what you heard and watched, hit that subscribe button so that you get notifications of every time we drop a new podcast. Also, share this video with your peers and your friends, and get the word out about the Crop Science Podcast Show. Finally, feel free to leave us a comment if you have any suggestions, questions for our old guest, or suggestion for a new guest. Bhupinder, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure learning about horticulture in South Carolina.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was my pleasure, and thank you.